Dr. Terry Linhart is a professor of Christian ministries at Bethel College, and he says the first step in addressing a blind spot is to be aware of its existence, and he joins us with the definition of blind spot. Welcome back to the Harvest Show. It's always great to have you.
Terry. Oh, thanks so much.
Okay, what are blind spots?
Well,
let's get right to it.
All right, we're getting right to it. So blind spots are often, I think, things that other people can see. It's like when we drive in a car.
Okay,
they exist. We can't quite see them in the mirrors, but everybody else can see them. And so the book comes out of my burden for those who are in leadership or want to make a difference in the world. For those of us who are Christians, just in the workplace, wherever we may be, there may be things sitting in the blind spots that we don't know about, but everybody else can see them, and they'd love for us to recognize them.
Now, I know you love to write to leaders. You're the go-to guy on leadership and millennials and working with younger Christians, but this can be applied to any area of our life, right? In any age, right?
Yeah, it is. I think these are issues. The subtitle says discovering your blind spots to reach your ministry potential, but the book is really for everyday people who to read it. I've had people who aren't in ministry but who volunteer at the church. We just written it for what I call street level reading. It's not academic writing at all. It's just for everyday people to just be better, to relate to others better. You talk about blind spots. So for me in my life, it was that I had some what we call people problems that I wasn't aware of until you get to the end and you just realize, oh, I have things I need to work on.
Are most people self-unaware?
Well, I don't know, but I know it happens more than we care to admit. And for me in my area, the book birthed out of a burden I have for young leaders who just had some issues that the church didn't know quite how to help them with. And I think we don't always know how to bring up some of the topics in this book about maybe we overreact emotionally or we too often withdraw, and those are some things we need to work on. And so I think there is a lack of awareness on a lot of our parts.
Okay, so the title of your project is The Self-Aware Leader. I mean, how can we become more aware of who we really are and that, that integrity that we have out front is also manifested in our private lives?
Yeah. I think this is part of a very biblical mandate for us to conform to the image of Christ. And that conforming, this isn't about being to raise ourselves. It's actually to grow in our Christ-likeness, in this. And so we need help in doing that. And in the same way that Paul encouraged Timothy to train himself, that's got an athletic feel to it. We're going to work on this. We need help and coaches to help us see in the blind spots, to say, to come alongside of us, and maybe we ask them the question, what do you notice about my life? When you're with me, what do you experience? Those kind of questions where we just take an honest evaluation of how we're coming across to others, how we react to situations, and even how we lean into our work.
But an honest evaluation requires honesty on both parts, and I have to think that if you go to people who are under you and you ask questions like this, it's going to be very difficult for them to give you an honest reaction back, isn't it?
It totally is. And so here's why the secret reason I wrote the book is this is perfect for a situation where that exactly exists, where you have a supervisory relationship or a small group of team leaders and they just don't know how to navigate that power differential. I say this book does the heavy lifting to raise the issues, and it creates a very safe environment for two people, a group of people, to work through a chapter and then answer the questions together at the end. And we even have downloadable discussion guides for groups, for supervisors, even for personal retreat at the website selfawareleader.org. And we just want to serve. We do. This book is meant to be a tool used in those situations to help circumvent that exact issue.
So what do you mean by reaction selfie?
Yeah, so my friend Mark Titley, who's a youth pastor at Every Nation Church in Johannesburg, I was sharing this one time, and he said, you're asking people to take a reaction selfie. Let's say we're interacting some way, and you say something or do something, and I have a reaction. You may not see it. It may be just my shoulder, or I raise my eyebrow. And what I want people to do in that moment, what's been helpful for me is just to take a picture of why I reacted that way, just like a selfie, and then later on look at that and say, okay, I reacted that way. What does that say about what I want? What does that say about my heart? What does that say about things? It's in the same way that Instagram, I mean, half the pictures on there are selfies. In the same way we see that a lot. Take a picture of your reactions and then unpack them later.
Okay, but I've taken selfies that I do not like. So sometimes when we look at that reaction, we won't be happy with it. What's the next step so that we can change the reaction?
Especially when it comes to seeing our emotions, which was a very difficult chapter. Sometimes when we name an emotion. So for me in the early days, my issue was that I was angrier than I realized. And the moment I felt comfortable saying, wow, I'm angry, it was like, okay, now let's deal with it. And then you can go back to scripture, you can go to trusted godly counselors, friends you have to say, okay, how do I help? Why am I angry? What's that coming from? And how is it that I can be more Christ-like in my reactions there?
A lot of times our reactions are formed by things that happened in our past. And overcoming the past is something all Christians have to deal with at some point or another. But it's easier said than done. How does the book help us with getting past our past?
I think the past is very difficult because we have past wounds, we have past relationships, we have past successes, and even how we reacted in high school, the drive for popularity, the drive to fit in, insecurities that held us back, that is the most difficult thing. We're sitting here shaped by our past. And yet we don't want to let the past define our future, as we often say. And so that is a very helpful process that I've found. I had a colleague who was a fellow pastor at my church, and I would often just go in his office and say, hey, I'm recognizing this. This is where you need a pilgrim that's traveling with you on the journey of life together. And you come into a relationship and you say, let's unpack some of these issues as they pop up. I think the reactions point to that. So for me, sometimes I recognize in young leaders who may be starting out in ministry that they want to be popular. So they only hang out with the popular students in their youth group. And I just say, you're thirsting for something there. And I think it's those thirsts that we have, the wants in our life. What is it we want? And often Jesus asks that of people. And when we can identify those, then we can say, okay, where does that come from in my past?
So you use two analogies throughout the book. You talk about seeing the leadership race before us and seeing the end goal. Why do you focus on those two?
Well, I was a cross-country runner in high school, so I tell a story. I was the slowest runner in my high school my freshman year, and yet the coach always said, hey, you all have potential, and he would even look at me when he said the word potential. It made me feel good. But, Paul uses the analogy of an athlete a lot in Scripture. And if we set out on the race, I want to make a difference in the world, whether I'm in ministry vocationally, I'm a volunteer, a parent, I'm in my neighborhood. If we want to do our best, then let's make it count. And then we should strive like an athlete to just strain. I press on. Everything Paul says, we want to make it our best. And so like an athlete, we strain in.
Any good book has blood, sweat, and tears from the author in it. As you went through the processes that you describe, what did you discover about yourself?
That self-awareness is a process. It's not a state. You never really arrive. And I read through the book now and I think, oh, that's good. And then I realize, hey, I wrote that. God just still has a way of coming along and saying, Linhart, you still got work to do.
Yeah, you need to be a little more self-aware if you don't realize that you wrote the book.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you mean by seeing your margins?
Seeing the margins. Well, I'm a professor, so when someone turns in a paper, they have a 1-inch margin around the edge. That's actually 37% of the page. And I don't think very many of us live our lives where a third of our life is just margin. It's not empty space, it's margin. What do we do to renew ourselves on a regular basis? We've packed it to the ends of the page and filled it with social media and everything, and we don't have time of renewal. So you think of how much time now we spend in scripture and reading, doing recreation, all the things that renew us. And I think we need to understand we have limits to our life that we need to pay attention to. The Sabbath is given to us for a reason. We need to have a day where we're replenishing and drawing close to God.
When a person reads The Self-Aware Leader, what do you want them to walk away with?
A commitment to draw closer to Christ. I'm a little, it is about self-awareness, but not so we promote ourselves.
Right.
It's self-awareness so that at the end of our life, we look back and we were as faithful in the process as we could be.
Amen to that.
There you go.
Well, to get a copy of The Self-Aware Leader, go to Terry Linhart's Facebook page, or you can go to the Harvest Show Facebook page and be sure to like us while you're there. And you can always connect with us at harvest-tv.com. Still to come, Pastor Mark Lance with part 2 of Connections. But up next, Brian Bush with today's Holy Land Moment. We'll be right back.